So good day everyone, this is Errol G. Bukaling, a BS Medical Laboratory Science slash Medical Technology student, a third year student, and now I am going to discuss the intellectual revolution and society. But before that, let me discuss to you our intended learning outcomes for the day. So at the end of this lesson, the student will be able to discuss and explain how the intellectual revolution changed how humans see the world. The second one, research on the other intellectual revolution that advanced modern science and scientific thinking. And the third one, describe the technological advancement that happened in the information age. So when we say revolution in science, we are referring to the spinning of a matter around itself or around the other matter. But in this lesson, we will be dealing with the groundbreaking intellectual revolution that turns the world into 360 degrees. It is likely strongly believing into something and someone destroyed what you are believing for. So in this lesson also, I divided the topic to three parts. The first one is the Copernican revolution, the second one, the Darwinian revolution, and the third one is the Freudian revolution. So this time, let's discuss the first topic, which is the Copernican revolution. In the early times, people questioned what created days and night. Perhaps some of you would answer God, but religion is not the case here. So they wanted to understand what heavenly bodies like stars, moons, and planets are. The invention of the telescope allowed the people to take a peek at the outer space. But more importantly, it also intrigued them to know what was actually out there. Many Greek philosophers and intellectuals wrote about planets in an attempt to explain the movements of heavenly bodies and the effects on the world as they knew it. Many of them agreed that the planets move around in circular motion and that this movement created days and nights, among others. A famous philosopher and astronomer, Claudius Ptolemy, stated that the planets, as well as the sun and the moon, moved in a circular motion around the earth. He believes that the earth was the center, a concept known as geocentrism. So in the 16th century, Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish mathematician and astronomer, challenged the Ptolemaic model. He introduced a new concept known as heliocentrism, which suggested that the center of the solar system was not the Earth, but actually the Sun. But this idea was rejected at first by the public, since the religious belief had taught them that the Earth was created before all other things. But after some time, astronomers realized that the Copernican model simplified the orbits for planets. It also answered issues that could not be explained using the geocentric model. It was eventually accepted by the people in a period which was called the birth of modern astronomy. So as you can see in the picture posted, the Ptolemy's model and the Copernicus model, which is the Ptolemy's model, um, the geocentric, and the Copernicus model, or the his model is the heliocentric, which is Ptolemy thought that all celestial objects, including the planets, sun, moon, and stars, orbited the Earth on the Earth in the center of the universe and did not move at all. And note that the planets like Uranus and Neptune are missing from both charts because they had not been discovered at the time. And then, at part of the Copernicus or the sun-centered or heliocentric Copernicus was correct about some things but wrong about others. The sun is not in the center of the universe and it does move as do the stars. Also, both Copernicus and Ptolemy thought that the orbits of the planets were circular, but we now know they are elliptical. So this picture explains the two model, the Ptolemy's model and the Copernicus model. So now this time let's discuss the second topic, the Darwinian Revolution. So the Darwinian Revolution was considered to be one of the most controversial intellectual revolutions of its time. In 1859, Charles Darwin, an English naturalist, biologist, and geologist, published his book on the origin of species. In this book, Darwin introduced the theory of evolution, which posited that population passed through a process of natural selection in which only the fittest would survive. However, this theory became very controversial as people perceive it to be contradictory to the church teaching that the source of life is a powerful creator, because some believe and accepted the biblical version of the earth's creation. Because of this conflict, people were divided. Some believed that their theory explained the origin of life, but the religious and the faithful strongly refuted it. And this has turned the world upside down, for it has caused confusion and later divide the individuals whether they will believe um, the science or they will believe in God. But according to Albert Einstein, the more in his statement, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. And note, Albert Einstein is one of the scientists who believe in God, and which only implies that he admires everything that this universe could offer. So now let's discuss the Freudian Revolution. So in the past, the field of psychology was always um, classified under the philosophy, and psychology was considered more of an art rather than a science. In the late 19th, Sigmund Freud was able to change people's perception of psychology with his revolutionary theory of psychoanalysis. So when we say psychoanalysis, it is the study that explains human behavior. Freud explained that there are many conscious and unconscious factors that can influence behavior and emotions. He also argued that personality is a product of three conflicting elements, which is the id, ego, and superego. So for the next slides, I am going to discuss the the three conflicting elements, which is the id, ego, and superego. So now let's discuss the three conflicting elements: the id, the ego, and the superego. So let's discuss first the id. The id is primitive and instinctual part of the mind that contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. It also operates on the pleasure principle. So every wishful impulse should be satisfied immediately, regardless of the consequences. So when the id achieves its demand, id experiences pleasure, and when it's denied, id experience unpleasure or tension. So yun's id. And the next one is ego. ego, it operates according to the reality principle. It works out realistic ways of satisfying the id's demand. The ego also considers social realities and norms, etiquettes, and rules in deciding how to behave. And if the ego fails to use the reality principle, anxiety is experienced and is um, unconscious defense mechanism are employed to help ward off the unpleasant things. And the last one is our super ego. Super ego, it incorporates the values and morals of the society. So the super ego function is to control the impulses. So meaning it persuades the ego to choose moralistic goals and to strive for perfection rather than simply realistic one. And according to Freud, the superego consists of two systems: the conscience and the ideal self. In conscience, if the ego gives in to the id's demand, the superego now make the person feel bad through the guilt. And for the ideal self naman, it is an imaginary picture of how you ought to be. It represents you, or it represents career aspiration, or on how you or on how to treat other people and how to behave as a member of society. So that is your ideal self, kung paano mo makontrol ang iyong sarili towards in your society. And sabi pa ni Freud, in the structure of the mind, the ego and the superego function in different levels of consciousness. There is a constant movement of memories and impulses from one level to another. And the id, on the other hand, is unaffected by reality, logic, or the everyday world as it operates within the unconscious part of the mind. So, so that's it. Thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something today about the intellectual revolution and society. I hope you are safe right now, and God bless everyone. Thank you and keep safe.